Yeah, well, it is, as we've already said, it is great to be here. And I was just thinking how it really is great to be here as well. Because last time I spoke to you, I was sitting in a chair in our bedroom. You remember how strange that kind of thing was, wasn't it? You know, and I remember Emma coming in halfway through looking for something while I was talking to you. It was all just very strange kind of dynamics, wasn't it? But it really is very, very good to be here, and we're going to continue to think about this great vision that God has for the nations, for the world around us. And as we do that, we're going to do it by looking at this psalm, Psalm 67, from this 3,000-year-old songbook. You ever think of it that way? That's what the Psalms are, isn't it? It's an ancient songbook. It's a real treasure that we have in our Bibles. And the songwriter in Psalm 67 is writing, as songwriters often do, about what is important to him, what moves him, what grabs him, and he crafts his words with skill, arranging them very, very carefully, as you'll see. If you can have it in front of you, you'll see something of the way it's written even is communicating a message. Because it comes in 3 stanzas. Maybe you can see that as you look at it. Most of the Bible split it up that way. It's got 3 sections. Verse 1 and 2, verse 3 to 5 in the middle, and then verse 6 and 7. And the thing about this psalm is, it seems that it's crafted so that it kind of radiates out from the middle verse. So it's almost like a kind of dropping a pebble into the water, you know, and the ripples kind of go outwards. It seems to be done that way on purpose. And so because of that, it might seem a bit odd to do, but I'm going to start in the middle instead of at the beginning. The center of it all, the center of the middle part of the middle stanza, we have verse 4, "May the nations be glad and sing for joy, for you rule the peoples with equity and guide the nations of the earth." Okay, that's his vision, and that's his big thing. May the nations be glad and sing for joy, for you rule the peoples with equity and guide the nations of the earth. I don't know what you long for as you look at the world, what you wish it was like. There's so much that's not right, isn't there? But here's what he longs for. He's celebrating the thought of and longing for the time when all the peoples of the world will be glad, happy, satisfied, and enjoying God as the one who rules with equity, rules justly. So they're living in freedom without fear, because that's what you have when you have a just ruler, isn't it? We see how that isn't the case in many countries where there's unjust rulers. So they're living in freedom, as recognizing God as the one who rules with equity, and recognizing him as the one who guides them and leads them and shepherds them even. So that his vision is of the peoples of the world in sync with their Creator, in step with his ways, and enjoying all that means. So that's his thing in the middle. Verse 4, the center point. That's the vision. But then, if you go out one notch, verse 3 and 5, either side of it, I don't know if you noticed, they're identical to each other. They're exactly the same. And they add this refrain, "May the peoples praise you, God. May all the peoples praise you. May the peoples praise you, God. May all the peoples praise you." And so he's just crafting this picture, isn't he, of all the peoples singing. Maybe just imagine it. Just try and picture that. This huge throng praising God for all he's done. In contrast, you could describe what we have now as perhaps a kind of a discordant, broken and confused sound. You know, the world around us right now, so many different outlooks, worldviews, philosophies, contradictory ways of thinking, clashing ways of living, just people are at each other all the time. You only need to spend 5 minutes on social media to see that, don't you? And perhaps despair. It's a harsh, discordant noise, and we see that in the world around, and so much of the division and the strife and the pain that comes as a result of that. I've been in contact with friends in Myanmar and in Afghanistan just this week, just to name 2 places where there is such fear and destruction going on. And it's, well, I was going to say it's all over the news. It is for Afghanistan. Myanmar seems to have dropped off the news, but it's just as bad as it was and getting worse people living in hiding, escaping into the jungle, barricaded into villages, struggling to get food and some basic supplies, soap, salt, things like that. If you want to try and help with that, talk to me afterwards. We're able to try and help them in some ways. But I was in communication with other friends in another country where they're hiding in a basement out of fear because of they're worried about if they are found. Situations of great hostility, such brokenness, animosity, discord. In our own localities, it might be less extreme, but we see evidence of brokenness here too, don't we? Whether it's crime rates, domestic issues, just greed and selfishness. You get fights and arguments among colleagues and family members and friends. And if we're honest, if we're really honest this morning, we know also that we contribute to that sometimes too, don't we? We struggle to the extent that we fail to live up to all that God's called us to be. And sometimes we live and think, if we're honest, struggle to live up to our own standards at times. The world is broken and discordant, which is why the alternative vision here is so compelling, isn't it? Because instead of this discordant, harsh, broken sound, the vision is of a harmonious, united song of praise of all the peoples praising God. And if you let your mind run with that for a minute, we're talking about people from the most closed, difficult, war-torn places in the world, the places where the Home Office would tell you not to go, and people from the most affluent and wonderful, secure places, and everywhere in between, all gathered, this diverse people of many cultures and backgrounds living under God's just reign, praising him in harmony with one another, with God and his creation, living in peace and harmony and wholeness. It's like Revelation 7 describes, isn't it? In Revelation 7, it talks about people of every nation and tribe and people and language standing before the throne and before the Lamb, Jesus, because that's what this is all driving towards, and singing, "Salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb." This middle stanza, this middle section, is an amazing, fabulous vision, a true utopia. But how is it going to come about? How is God bringing it about? How is it going to happen? Well, as we continue to let the poem spread out from the center, we get the first and the last stanzas, and there's something in both of those that we need to comprehend, and that's this: that there is a connection between the life of the community of God's people and the nations of the world finding him and knowing him and enjoying him. Okay? There's a connection between the life of the community of God's people in a given place and the nations of the world finding him. So look at verse 1. He starts off right at the beginning now. We're going right to the start. "May God be gracious to us and bless us and make his face shine on us." He's using words there as poets often do. He's trying to use words to remind you of other words, to draw your mind back to other situations. It's an echo of the priestly blessing from Numbers 6. You might remember the priestly blessing that's sometimes used where this was given to Aaron in Numbers 6, verse 24. "The Lord bless you and keep you, make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace." And this was something that was given to the priests to bless the people in the very early days as a nation. They'd not long left Egypt, and they're becoming established as a nation. And this is really, it's from like the founding documents of their nation. So it was a really special, affirming thing. And the psalmist here deliberately echoes that and celebrates it and says, "God, be gracious to us and bless us and make your face shine on us." And I love how personal that is. The idea of the shine of God's face is a lovely image, isn't it? The warmth of the shine of God. The idea of being known. I think that's part of it, isn't it? It's not just a transactional deal. It's when somebody's face is looking at you, you feel known. It's personal. And so it's remembering that, and they're singing it, I think, at the time of harvest, because when you look in verse 6, it says, "The land yields its harvest, God our God blesses us." That seems to be all part of the blessing that they're praying for and thanking God for. and asking that he would continue to bless them. But have you noticed that there are some "so that" clauses in there? Now, it depends which version you have in front of you, but if you look in verse 2, in this first stanza, it says, "May God bless us," verse 2, "so that your ways may be known on earth, your salvation among all nations." And then there's another in the last stanza as well, at least there is I've got the 2011 NIV here, which is kind of mirroring the first one. It's not actually in the original Hebrew, so some of the Bibles don't have it, but most people seem to agree that it's implied by the context. So as it says it here in my translation, "May God bless us still, so that all the ends of the earth will fear him." These two "so that's," two reasons being given for God's blessing. There's many other reasons, of course, but two given here. Verse 2, "so that his ways may be known on earth," and "so that the ends of the earth will fear him," in verse 7. That he may be known and that he will be feared. Because here's the thing, many people don't know anything about God and his ways, do they? Because no one's told them. Just at a very straightforward level. Many may not have Bibles in their own languages, which is why Bible translation is such an important and ongoing work. It's still a need. Just this week, I've been looking at an app that's been produced by some friends who've been gradually getting some key chunks of the scriptures translated into a particular mountain language, which is spoken by many people, even many in the UK, as a heart language. And these people have been translating it, and then they've been recording audio of it. It's a little bit like what Sarah was talking about. And then they've now been able to put that onto an app, and people can now listen, and they can know. It's just another way in which people can know of God's ways. And people are needed to tell people, aren't they, too, or to give literature to them. Many people don't know because no one's told them. Or maybe people don't know because, they've heard something, but perhaps what they've heard is a distortion. And I think that's often the case in this country, isn't it? Maybe people have a kind of a twisted or misrepresented version of it, or they have a few snatches of random stories, but no kind of coherent comprehension of how it fits together. So it just seems like a bit of an archaic irrelevance. Or where we are, people are sometimes taught a distortion where they're told there's lots of different Bibles and they all say different things. And that Christians believe in three gods, God, Jesus, and Mary. And so on. Just lots of confusion about what the message is. That's why people need to know of God and his ways. They need to know. There's something that needs to be understood, what his ways are. And in that second one, so that they may fear him. They need to fear him. Sometimes we're not quite sure what to make of the idea of fearing God, are we? The Bible talks about the fear of the Lord quite a lot. And we sometimes say it's about reverence and awe, and that's certainly part of it. But there is a sense in which God is to be feared. I think you think about the way that a parent might perhaps rightly be feared by their children. Of course, there's a wrong and abusive form that can take, but there is a right sense in which, the way a child reacts when you say, what will your parents say? And they kind of go, some of you remember that feeling? There's a right sense of, what will my parents say? A fear of their response and their reaction. Yeah, we know it from working in schools too. Part of the respect and the ability to manage a class sometimes comes from a healthy fear of the teacher. Some of you know I taught in a school in Luton for several years, and I remember the lady who was my mentor when I started. She was the legend that is Maggie Herring, sadly passed away now, although she became a believer later in life, which was a wonderful thing. But we used to say that she could fry a child with her eyes at 20 paces. She's kind of helped by the thick mascara as well. But she was a wonderful teacher, and the kids loved her. And she was really kind and lots of fun, but she was just slightly unpredictable. And they knew they had to take her seriously. Remember how C.S. Lewis describes Aslan as good but not safe. Remember in the Narnia stories? and the children, they realize for the first time that Aslan's a lion. And they go, he's a lion? Is he safe? And is it Mr. Beaver, I think, is the one who's talking to them and says, of course he's not safe. He's a lion. But he is good. Yeah? This is the God we're talking about. The God who made everything and knows everything. And there's a sense in which that should be slightly scary and daunting. The awesome, wonderful King of the universe who knows us and loves us deeply, but whose ways matter and who we should respect and honor and listen to. And, well, in the New Testament, he spoke at the Transfiguration, didn't he? And said, this is my son, listen to him. Something to take seriously. So, when we get these two so-that's, we realize that as a community of God's people, we are blessed, but not for our sake only. Not for our sake only. We are blessed so that we can be a blessing. And just as this psalm radiates out from the center, this is how God's blessing of the world works. In fact, I think the psalm was written this way on purpose, which you've got to admit makes it some pretty cool poetry, doesn't it? That even the very formation and pattern of the words is a visual image of the message that it's telling. Why one writer, I think probably why one writer calls it the spreading circle as his title. This spread of life-giving knowledge. It's bubbling out and it's flowing out. C.H. Spurgeon, another writer, writing 140 years ago or something now, he describes it like this, the same sort of idea. He says, as showers, which first fall upon the hills, afterwards run down in streams into the valleys, so the blessing of the Most High comes upon the world through the church. We are blessed for the sake of others as well as ourselves. God deals in a way of mercy with his saints, and then they make that way known far and wide, and the Lord's name is made famous in the earth. That's what this psalm is all about. That's what it's all about, the glory of God, that the peoples may know and praise him and fear him. But as we start to wrap up, I want to try and think how we respond, the so what factor. And there's three things that I want to suggest we should do in response to this. They are be thankful, play your part, and pray. Be thankful, play your part, and pray. Be thankful because when we get a sense of where we fit in all of this through time and where we are in the world, we need to understand that most, if not all of us, are part of the result of this being worked out, aren't we? We're not the center of the universe. You know, let's kind of remember that in case we forget that we live on what would have been a far distant island to the people who wrote this. The fact that we're here this morning, reading this, praying, singing praises to God, is an answer and a fulfillment of this vision. So there's a huge amount to be thankful for that this is true as we read this. We are part of the fulfillment of it. So be thankful, first of all. And then second, play your part. Because we've talked, haven't we, how we're blessed for the sake of others. Okay, we've experienced blessings here. All of us have experienced many different kinds of blessings, not least in terms of knowing God and knowing something about him and knowing his ways. That is not so that we can just have a nice time together and be a nice club. This is something that is supposed to spill out and affect the world around us. The idea of loving God, as it talks about and as Jesus echoes in the New Testament, we love God and then we love others. We love our brothers and sisters, but also Jesus said and echoed that we love our neighbor as ourselves, and then expanded that further and said, love your enemy. And when defining who your neighbor was, remember he told the story of the Good Samaritan, which means even the people you really can't stand. It's flowing out and out and out. When we are blessed, it should bless others. Through that powerful combination of what we live, how we live, and what we say. It's both. Both of those things. The way that we live and the things that we say. I heard a friend put it really well this week when he was saying how when God blesses you, and shows you something of his ways, it's not just for you, your neighbors should benefit. When you grasp a truth of what God wants of you, your kids should be blessed by that as you live it out, and your friends or your spouse. When you know something new or really get to grips with something about the way God works in the world, the person who sits at the desk near you at work ought to get and feel some of the benefit of that as you live it out in your life, shouldn't they? And maybe you find the courage to speak and say something as well, or give away a book or a gospel or something, and so that the blessing that comes to you spreads. You see how it works? Living out the blessing of God and making his ways known where we are, where you are right now. So we need to live it out where we are. But I also want to say, for some of us, we need to live it out somewhere else as well. Somewhere else, because some of us need to go. Some of us need to move. You think about it, for the circle to spread, some need to move. For the spread of this life-giving knowledge to flow, we move out so that that can happen. And some of us need to facilitate that with resources and finance, and many of you do, and God bless you for that. But we play our part in the place where we are, and for some of us, in another place as we go, and maybe we go for a long time, for a permanent move, or for years, and some of us, as some of you have in the past, maybe go for a short time, even just for a few days or a week, as Sarah was just talking about. To go out and play our part. So we should be thankful, we should play our part, and lastly, we should pray. We should pray. Because remember, this is a prayer. So if you don't know what else to pray, guess what? You can just echo the words of this psalm. And in fact, wouldn't that be a good thing to do this week? To plan every day to read this psalm, but to consciously read it as a prayer and deliberately echo it as a prayer that God would do this. Maybe you can learn it. Maybe we can ask that God would burn it into our hearts so that we live it and love it. As we finish, why don't we read it now together? Let's do that. Most of you have probably got the same version. One of two of us might not have. That doesn't matter. Let's just read it anyway, whatever you've got in front of you. Psalm 67. Let's read it and pray it, and let the truth of it burn into our hearts. Together. May God be gracious to us and bless us, and make his face shine on us, so that your ways may be known on earth, your salvation among all nations. May the peoples praise you, God. May all the peoples praise you. May the nations be glad and sing for joy, for you rule the peoples with equity and guide the nations of the earth. May the peoples praise you, God. May all the peoples praise you. The land yields its harvest. God, our God, blesses us. May God bless us still, so that all the ends of the earth will fear him. And let's do that now as an expression of the fulfillment of that. We're going to sing to finish, the splendor of the King. How great is our God. And as we stand and sing this, we're a fulfillment of this. A bunch of people on this far distant island singing how great is our God. And we're singing it out, encouraging one another so that we can live for him and see that circle spread still wider in our lives through this week. Amen.